I'm really glad to do this right now.
Well, right on. Yeah, it looks like you guys been busting your butts. Yeah, for sure. But that lumber looks beautiful. So it looks like
Yeah.
he's really salvaging those trees pretty well. So
Yeah, I had some really pretty walnuts that they were quite straight, black walnuts. I didn't know
yeah,
how that lumber would come out, and man, it just came out gorgeous. I saved that for I want to make a table, and I want to make an island countertop out of it.
yeah,
It's all two
right on.
inch plus thick, and anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I just
Yeah,
need one. I just needed one more project, right,
right.
around the house.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's all I need. One more project.
one
Yeah.
more project. Just keep me
Uh,
busy. Anyway,
yeah. Keep you out of trouble. All that sort
yep,
of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, yeah, yep. Idle hands will get you in trouble. Busy hands keeps you out of trouble. All that sort of thing.
right, right. Well, you have to keep thinking and keep moving, all that kind of stuff. Anyway,
Yeah,
speaking of
that's right.
thinking, I've been thinking about how
Yeah.
we closed up our last talk, and it just kept kind of by. I think I gave you too much of a pass, way too much. It just
All right.
we were talking about regulations and why we shouldn't have regulations, and I went down through a list of several of our federal entities, and you were just like we should abolish them all. I was quite shocked. So I just want to kind of touch back on that.
Well, yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
okay. Fair enough. Well, if that's how I came across, that's certainly not what I meant to articulate.
yeah,
Um, I what the way I view regulations, they're a method of last resort.
hmm
So, for instance, if you've got companies that are doing, whatever type of industry that are polluting rivers, let's say,
hang on
and
just
that
one
you just,
second. Hang on. You
okay,
got something in your camera view, just a little on your right hand side. There's something just catching the edge of your camera there. No, I mean like right
oh,
at the
oh,
camera.
oh, oh,
There you go.
there we go. That's my microphone and whatnot. There you
Yeah.
go.
Now I got
Good
a full
call.
screen. I got your full
Yes.
beautiful screen now. Okay, go on. Carry on.
Okay.
Sorry to
All right.
interrupt.
Beautiful.
Polluting rivers.
So if you, yeah. So if you've got, so for instance, I mean, the thing I think of is L.A., right, where you had the smog back in the 70s and early 80s,
Oh yeah.
and once we started to institute some regulations on how on emissions and that sort of thing, the smog cleared up.
Yeah, it's
Um,
done really
so
well. Yeah.
right, yeah, absolutely. So that was a good regulation that the government put in place that solved the problem. All right, but that was a measure of last resort. What
Right.
it seems like
And
these
most of that was
days
just the
is
California measure too, because they started their CARB with
yeah,
their car stuff. So they build
right,
California only cars and all that. Now a lot of the states have adopted it. So, but our
right.
current government is trying to push that back the other way.
Well, but here's the thing is what I want to avoid is we see a problem and our first reaction is there should be a law.
hmm
That should not be our first reaction,
Right.
right? Um, be, uh, what what I have observed from the markets and just studying these various instances is a lot of the times, given a certain amount of time, the market will take care of these problems without government intervening with regulation, which has unintended consequences.
Well, give me an example of
So
that where the market
okay, so
fixed a regulation problem.
well, I'll give you a perfect example. Do you know why Jim Crow laws were instituted?
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Well, it was to hold down a sector of society.
Well, that's true. Okay, but the primary reason that Jim Crow laws were instituted in the South was because certain businessmen saw that there was an opportunity to appeal to a segment of the population and sell their goods to a segment of the population that another segment of the population saw as inferior.
hmm
Okay, so businesses in the South that would that would allow blacks to patronize their business were outperforming those businesses that would not patronize blacks.
Right.
And so those business entities that were not allowing black patronage to come into their businesses appealed to the government to put forth a regulation that would require all businesses to refuse to patronize blacks in the same way that the market would allow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for instance, if you and I were in business in the South, and I was selling wedding cakes, let's say, and you were selling wedding cakes,
Right.
And my bakery would sell wedding cakes to black couples or even interracial couples that were being married in the South, and your business, because you didn't believe in that sort of thing, you thought that blacks were inferior, and that interracial marriage was immoral. You refused to sell wedding cakes to those folks whose business prospered. Mine did, because I had a larger market to appeal to.
Right.
Yeah. And so what you did, because you didn't want to see that happen, was you petitioned the government to put a regulation on my business. I could not sell wedding cakes to black couples or interracial couples, and therefore you quashed that segment of my business. That was what Jim Crow laws were meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's a perfect example of where regulation led, where somebody said, "Oh, there should be a law against people selling cakes to black couples." Not selling cakes. There should be a law against white men making cakes for black couples. There should be a law against that. Yeah.
Right.
So that would be a very good example of where the market could have taken care of a situation that regulation actually regulation actually exasperated the problem.
Didn't the people that were driving the market drove that regulation? The regulation just didn't come out of anywhere. I mean, the people that wanted that regulation went to their legislators and they asked for that legislation. So obviously the people that wanted to, so you got a really complicated example too. So I think that it's opposite of what you're saying, is that the market drove that legislation to become, because they wanted to make sure that they were on an even playing field, first of all, but also they drove that regulation.
No, the market didn't drive that regulation. Mm-hmm. The people wanted to regulate the market drove that legislation.
Mm-hmm. So who wanted to regulate the market?
The racists.
Okay, and who are those racists? Are they other businessmen, or they're legislators, or they're the cahoots, or whatever?
They are all the above.
Okay.
They are, because the market doesn't tolerate racism.
Mm-hmm.
That the only thing that tolerates racism is when the government intervenes and imposes a regulation upon the market that allows racism to be tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think I'm going along with that one, but yeah, I think that what drove that regulation was the people that owned the market at the time wanted to make sure they maintained their market and wanted to make sure
nobody owns the market. That's where I would completely. Nobody owns the market. Is the market. The market is going to do what the market is going to do when it's left unfettered. Mm-hmm. Right? When you unfetter the market is going to do what. I mean, that's it. It's a simple matter of supply and demand. That's all markets are. It's a simple matter of supply and demand. Okay, so the only time the market is going to alter itself, quote unquote, is when you intervene. And so what I'm saying is that, yes, I think there are certain situations where, like the example I gave you with California, where the government intervened in the market and said, okay, wait a second, guys. What's going on here is causing a problem. We can see it over our skies. Mm-hmm. We need to do something about this. and we need to intervene in the market. Okay, there are certain situations where I would say yes, that would be an appropriate step to make, but that is a last resort move. Where we're at now with regulation is that's the first resort move. Okay, we see a problem, make a law, make a regulation.
It's not easy to make regulation, so I kind of disagree with you that way.
It's
I think they wait
very
for things
easy.
to happen.
Oh my gosh, you're delusional if you think it's not easy to make regulations. Give you an example. I just got a great regulation put in place in favor of truck drivers. Simple, that easy. They just made it. So about 2 years ago, the FMCSA, which is the government regulatory authority that oversees truck drivers, put in place that truck drivers must take a 30-minute break after 8 hours of on-duty time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So that means once I start my clock in the morning, I have 8 hours until I must take a mandatory 30-minute break. Right? This was incredibly burdensome because and plus that it just didn't make any sense because we could get around it, and there was all kinds of loopholes in it.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 years ago the FMCSA made that regulation. Just recently they came out and said, okay, we're going to alter that regulation to say that only after 8 hours of consecutive on-duty driving time are you required to take the 30-minute break. So in other words, if I'm just on duty, not driving, then that doesn't count against the 8 hours. It's so these regulatory bodies can make regulations at their whim.
Mm-hmm. But they have to have something to back it up. They're either somebody's lobbying them to do it. People just, to be honest with you, legislators are lazy. They're not going to do anything unless they have to. So they have to have people lobbying them. They have to have people that are pushing for something to happen. Otherwise, they're just going to sit behind their desk and they go, everything's perfect. We'll just keep watching everything, right?
Well,
change is difficult in any situation.
Well, legislators, I would agree. Legislators are, as a rule, extremely lazy. Administrative states are not, and they can make rules at their whim. It just, all it takes is an administrative body to say, this is what we're doing. Because that's how Washington works. I mean, the way the country is run right now, especially in the realm of business, is much due to the regulatory state, to the administrative state. Because when certain laws are passed, like, hey, you know what? Truck drivers are driving way too long and they're getting tired and they're falling asleep and they're killing people. And so somebody passes a bill that says, hey, truck drivers are driving way too long, they're getting sleepy, and they're killing people, and so we don't want this to happen, and so we will pass this law that says this, and we will pass this on to the secretary as he may determine to deal with this problem. And that's where you get the administrative state, right? So the legislature has passed their power over to the executive. That's why you get this back and forth. So you got Trump coming in, and he's eliminating this regulation and that regulation, and then instituting this regulation. He's eliminating that regulation, this regulation, And then when Biden comes in, he's going to institute this regulation and this regulation and this regulation and this regulation, and that's how it goes. So the Congress is really not in charge of anything. They don't have a damn thing to say about any of that because the regulatory state, the administrative state, are the ones who are actually making the rules. And it's completely arbitrary. Nope.
But if it finally gets up to a certain level, then Congress steps in and they actually do an amendment or they do a bill that drives it. Right. They can't do a bill for every single law in every single place. It's just too complicated to do something like that.
No, that's ridiculous. That's the way our system was built. Our system was never built to hand all this power over to an administrative state that says, oh, we're going to fine tune all of this. So, whatever. No, that's not how it works. The Congress, the way our Constitution is set up is the Congress passes a bill, the executive branch approves of it, and the judicial branch oversees it that it is in fact constitutional.
Right.
That's how our Constitution is set up. But right now, the administrative state, the regulatory state, so the EPA, the FMCSA, go down the line, whatever administrative state, those are the people making the rules. It's not
Yeah, I
Congress.
agree.
It's not the three. Yeah.
But they're making the rules within there's a bill that's sent out, or a couple of bills or something. I'll give you, like in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, there were bills that were, and to interpret what's in that bill and to meet the intent of that bill, they have to make regulations, and that's what the administrative state does.
Yeah.
So
they're
not just arbitrary; they're there to meet that, and they can be challenged, of course, in court.
Well, they can be challenged. I'll agree with that, and they should be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of them are being challenged. But what really where our Constitution really has to draw back power is from this administrative state, where you can whoever, Joe Blow congressman can write a bill that says, hey, truck drivers are driving way too long and they're falling asleep and they're killing people, and we make a law that should no longer happen, and we will dictate to the secretary that they should make that happen. However the secretary dictates, as I don't remember the exact words, but that's very vague.
They're making a law that says this is what we want to happen, and they turn it over to the Secretary of Transportation, right? Secretary of Transportation says, all you states get together. This is what the intention of this is. We want the DOTs of each one of the states to go through and figure out what this actually means and how we're going to implement this. And you have to have that. You have to have that. And I'm going to use your trickle down one all the time. But that's how it trickles down.
I completely disagree with that. You don't have to have that. In fact, our Constitution does not allow for that. In fact, if Congress is worried about truck drivers driving too many hours and having accidents, they should make specific laws about how many hours truck drivers can drive, and that should be passed through the House, the Senate, and signed by the executive branch, and then deemed constitutional by the legislative branch. Our Constitution makes no provision for this administrative oversight. It just does not, because because essentially what you're doing is you're putting all of the specifics into the hands of you or me. Because if it was me, if I was in charge of the FMCSA, I would just say, you know what? No more electronic logs. You guys drive however you feel responsible to drive. Okay?
Sounds dangerous.
Okay, sounds dangerous, right? But you would do what? The opposite. You would crack down. You would want all these things put on computers where you could observe it. So if a truck driver's in violation, and God forbid he has an accident, somebody gets killed, then he goes to jail for the rest of his life. That's how you would have it.
Sure.
Okay.
If he's breaking the law, he should go to jail. You got down to the final ending.
But breaking the law,
breaking
what law? Right, well, breaking what law? Breaking a regulation that an administrative state individual, by his own interpretation of some statute that's come down from Congress that's very broad, very interpretive. He's going to interpret that my way or your way, right? So if you're the secretary of the FMCSA, you're going to send the guy to jail for the rest of his life, leave his family destitute because he made a mistake.
Yeah, all these legislators and all these government bodies are lazy, because whatever he writes, whatever that guy writes, what they're going to do is they're going to go to the Ohio DOT or Indiana DOT, and they're going to say, you know what, we adopt what he writes, because we don't want to write everything different. Other than something's very specific for our particular state, we adopt that. It's like the building code, right? The Universal Building Code of the United States is not written by each state or each municipality. It's written by a national body, and then there's some variations state by state when you read it. That's why when you get the Ohio Building Code, or even like where I live, the Hamilton County Building Code, it says in the very beginning that they've adopted this big building code, and you have to go by all those rules. Plus, you're going to go unless we override it here in Ohio, and this is what we expect when you're building something. So to think that your average guy, and I consider you and me as average guys, okay, sure, that they're going to go read and interpret a bill from Congress and how it relates to how we participate or how we act in our work, whatever. That we can't do it because everybody would be open to interpretation. That's why you have those administrators interpreting for us to make sure that we
Yeah,
understand the intent,
that's
right?
that's great. Oh yeah, I'm so
It's got to be
excited.
done.
No, I don't think it has to be done. What I think is you're exactly right. Is that legislators have to stop being lazy, and on top of that, legislators have to get out of this mode of feeling like that the first move is, hey, truck drivers are driving too long and people are getting killed. We should make a law.
Yeah. I don't hear too many stories like that about truck drivers driving too long and people getting killed.
No, I don't either.
Used to be.
Well, and that's
yes.
Well, it used to be, but the thing of it is that okay? So, I mean, I've looked at this data from back in the day when truck drivers didn't have logs, when they had paper logs, and okay. So, do you see a decrease in trucking accidents and fatalities involving truck drivers? Of course you do. But is it something year over year that has made an enormous difference in those type of fatalities? It really hasn't. Really hasn't made a huge difference.
You don't think so?
It made a difference. Yeah.
I think so. I think like, we mentioned OSHA last time too, right? I could look at whenever, growing up, and OSHA was quite young back then, back in the 70s, whenever I entered the workforce. And everybody used to complain about it then. They complain about it now. They come up with new regulations. Something simple. I mean, I do design work, right, for factories. So they come up with a new regulation around handrails on stairways inside of a factory. Instead of having just a regular handrail you hang onto, it has to be, it has this special design that you have to have it. So everybody's pulling their hair out trying to figure out how to make this thing work now because it's got a new handrail. That is actually, I've been in a couple of places that have already adopted it, and it is quite nice. It really is a better handrail than what we had before. But the other one did work too. So anyway, okay. But what I'm getting at is that I know in my jobs, in my type of work, it is much safer because whenever I started working, like in the power plants in the nuclear power industry, every power plant that was built in America had more than one person die during the construction. Okay, I worked at one in Georgia that had 5 people die during the construction. While I was working there, the times that I was working there, we had 5 people die. You don't hear about that. People don't. There are construction accidents. People do get killed because it is dangerous, right? But nowhere near the kind of fatalities that we had before. So I think OSHA's done, and as much as I hate them, I also love them. Okay, because they have done a good job, right?
Right. Well, and again, that's so you heard of people dying, right?
Not heard. I was there. I didn't see the person dead, but I knew that we had an incident at the job site that day. The person died.
Yeah. And so you put in these regulations, and now you don't. Okay.
Right.
So let's say that in those situations, 5 people died a year.
This is 5 people per project. Okay. We literally lost people every project.
That's all right. Let's say, right. So, all right. So you have 5 people per project. Mm-hmm. You have 100 projects. That's 500 people. Now you have 0.
Now we have 0.
Okay. How many? Yeah. So again, that's
what's
great.
Those 500 people's lives worth? What's it worth to have it? It's not, that's the extreme. We usually dwell in the extreme, but then you have to get to the gray area. It's not just the people that died; it's how many people got hurt or injured, and maybe even permanently injured during their time working in these facilities or building these facilities.
Yeah, well, okay,
and that happened all the time.
Right. Well, and again, I would say, okay, if we see, okay, so again, going back to the truck driving thing, if we see a persistent problem with guys driving too long and causing, fatal or very injurious accidents, all right, then we say, okay, this is an issue, and so I'm Senator Cruz in the Senate. And I see this and I say, hey, these guys are driving, 18 hours a day, and they're only maybe sleeping 2 or 4 hours a day, and then up and driving another 18 hours a day, and people are dying because of this.
Right.
I'm gonna write a 1-page law that says any company that forces their drivers on pain of uh, of of termination to drive more than 11 hours a day when the driver doesn't want to will be subject to a $500,000 fine. That sounds like a pretty good bill to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what? The thing of it is, after about 10 hours, 8, 9, 10 hours of driving, I'm done for the day. And
Yeah.
if a company says, you know what, screw you, you're going to keep driving, and I say, no, I'm not going to keep driving. They say, you're going to keep driving or we're going to fire you. Then I can go to the authorities and say, hey, this company is forcing me to drive more than I feel safe to drive on
Right.
pain of a 500. That's a bill.
Mm-hmm.
See, that leaves it on the truck driver. Because the truck drivers, these guys that run Outlaw, I've talked to these guys. They're like, man, I'm really thinking about joining a company that has electronic logs because I can't run like this.
Yeah.
You know,
So I look at it the
so
other way. It's usually well, you run into these guys, I guess you said outlaw, that are being forced to run like that. But I
yeah,
always think about how it was before, like when my dad was driving, right? Is that those guys
right,
wanted to drive just as many hours as they could because unless the wheels were turned, they weren't making money, right? So
yeah,
so really what you want to do is not have the regulators write them a ticket. You want the regulators to write the company a ticket. That
yeah,
500,000, that
yeah,
ticket should go to the company and say, don't ever allow your people to ever drive that much, period.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing of it is the regulators have this so buttoned up that the thing is, if I go 1 second, I'm on an ELD. If I go 1 second over that clock
Mm-hmm.
and I drive the next day and I'm in an accident, I could go to jail. Just that simple.
Right.
Just that simple. And who's it on? It's on the worker.
Mm-hmm.
So what I have seen in these regulations is most of this stuff ends up on the worker and not on the corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, again, it's this whole regulatory state. Let's just make a law. Oh, all we got to do is make a law, and
But didn't you
it'll
just
solve everything.
you didn't want to make all these laws because you wanted people to interpret, a bill. The worker would have to interpret the bill. You don't want all these other
100%.
administrators in the
Yes,
middle.
I trust the worker to interpret a bill more than I trust some administrator up in Washington to interpret whatever the Congress may desire. 100%.
I don't know. You've
Yes.
got a lot of faith in your fellow man that they
Yes,
even
I
want to do
do.
something.
I have way more faith in individuals than I do bureaucrats in DC. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's 100% right.
I don't know. I'm of the state that I think a lot of people in this world really do need to have some direction in their life because
Okay.
they just either they don't do the research, they're not interested in doing the research. It's just not in their, they're not even looking into it. When they go into a job, they have no idea what they're even getting into a lot of times.
Well,
So I don't
no,
think you
I
can
don't
really
just
leave it up to them. You need to make sure that the owners, the corporations and stuff are the ones that are
no,
set.
I think that corporate accountability has its place.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Again, but our first reaction is always there should be a law. And I think that should be our last reaction. I think our first reaction should be, folks, hey, this goes back to the whole COVID thing. That's
Mm-hmm.
why the whole COVID thing isn't working, isn't going to work, so long as it's this top-down deal.
But top-down deal. There's no top-down deal on COVID. There's
absolutely, well, and God be praised for that. But that doesn't mean that governors aren't trying it. I mean, Gavin Newsom in California is trying it. Cuomo in New York's trying it.
Hey, DeWine in Ohio's trying it. He's doing it fine with me.
Yeah.
I'm at home.
So But what I'd rather see happen is for the federal and local, state and local governments to come out and say, hey, here's the data, make your own decisions. So, for instance, I mean, I can't travel. So Jen and Isaac are going to go to New York. I can't travel with them. I can't risk that. Why? Because I have to be tested for COVID before I go to New York. Right? If I get tested for COVID and I'm positive, I can't get into I can't work anymore.
Right.
Now I'm out of work. So I can't do that.
So wait a second. What you're saying is you don't want to risk taking the test because if you turn up positive, you're out of work. Yep. Doesn't that seem a little backwards to you?
No.
Because you have to take the test. I mean, if you had it and you're asymptomatic, wouldn't you want to know?
Well, yeah.
So you don't spread it? Okay.
However, my thing is that I'd rather wear a sign around my neck say, hey, I have COVID and I'm asymptomatic. And if you're afraid of getting this virus, then you probably ought not be around me. Or if you're so scared of this thing that you ought to stay sheltered, and I'll do my part to stay away from those who are vulnerable. I'm not going to just waltz into it. But I'm going to steel mills.
When you go into a steel mill and you go and have the paperwork signed off, and you tell the guy thanks a lot, and the guy out there loading and stuff, you're there with him. You can't. I mean, I work from home all the time, but I go to the grocery store. I wear a mask.
Right.
But if I get
COVID, I work with aren't vulnerable. But the guys I work with aren't vulnerable. They're not elderly. They don't have comorbidities. Everybody's vulnerable, but they're not vulnerable to death. Right. I mean, the statistics.
I'm just going to throw one name out there. We'll throw one name out there. Did Brian have comorbidities?
That I'm not sure about, but you're that's anecdotal evidence. As much as I mourn the loss of my cousin,
that's a fact, man.
You're talking. But you're talking about anecdotal evidence. Okay. And so, and then again, you get down to, who do we trust to give us our information, right? Mm-hmm. And then again, like we talked about last time, the question comes down to individual freedom. Mm-hmm. Are we going to, that's kind of the choice we come down to. Are we going to say, okay, individual freedom is just way too much of a risk for this country. We've got to cut that out. We've got to. Okay.
No, but there's times when that freedom needs. There's times when that doesn't mean your individual freedom is curtailed forever. It just means there's a time whenever you have to do something for the greater good, and that's all it is. I mean, that just makes sense.
Patriot Act. The Patriot Act. That.
Patriot Act is well, that's a good example. All right. So that did it really help?
That never went away. In fact, has increased.
Yeah, that's right. It has.
So do you believe in America?
Act? Do you believe that it should be increased? Should we have Muslim bans?
No.
Should we be inspecting at airports?
No.
No? Train stations? No.
Nope.
You're going to trust everybody that gets on and off airplanes?
Give me liberty or give me death.
Okay. All right. Well, I see what you chose. Yep. No problem. But the problem is you're choosing.
And that's the thing is, and I can tell you that when Bush came out with the Department of Homeland Security, my heart sank to the lowest level I think I can ever remember. I mean, even this COVID thing, as nerve-wracking as this has been, when he came out and announced the Department of Homeland Security and the Patriot Act, I was like, I mean, I almost got arrested in the airport over it. Because I had my mom's dad's knife in my pocket and I forgot about it. Yeah. And I missed a flight and I almost got arrested because I was so pissed. I don't care who it is. Give me liberty or give me death. All right. If me being free means
when you're
that
not
I'm gonna die.
It's easy to say when you're not dying. It's easy to say. You're not part of that group, right? So, by Christmas, they're saying, hang on. With Christmas, they're saying we're going to be up to that 330,000 deaths by COVID, okay? That means 1 in 1,000 died, okay? if you look around your neighborhood, 1 in 1,000 is actually a very good big number now. Whatever everybody says, it's 0.01% of this person and comorbidity. Let's just take it just basic numbers. We've got 330 million people. We're going to have 330,000 deaths. That's 1 in 1,000. Now, if I'm playing the lotto, that sounds like pretty darn good odds. I'm playing that lotto. 1 in 1,000, heck yeah.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that, and I'll give you a rare glimpse into what I learned as a child from my dad, okay? My dad thought that people that couldn't take care of themselves were a drag on society. And he thought that even people, especially like crippled people and that, he didn't believe in, like handicapped people having special rights or anything. That, if they can't get around, it's their problem, or maybe we just eliminate them. Because they're, why do we go to all these extreme means to have a premature baby come into this world that maybe is going to live or maybe have some problems? Why do we go through all, if we have the means to know that a child maybe in the womb is already deformed or a problem, why do we go ahead and let that child? I mean, this is the kind of thing that I learned when I was growing up as a kid. Now, I think a little differently now, not completely differently, but a little bit differently. But your 1 in 1,000 argument is letting 1 in 1,000 people die, and it's letting the elderly die, the people with comorbidities. But it kind of strikes me in my brain, it's like, that's kind of the way my dad thought, is that, the weak die and the strong survive, and it just makes our culture and our society better. So let that sink in for just a second, because if you let 1 in 1,000 of our weakest die, and maybe 5 out of 1,000 are going to be scarred for life from this disease, what does that say about our society?
Well, I think your argument is a non sequitur, but let's chase that trail down a little bit. I mean, science tells us that the fittest survive.
It does.
So why are we trying to preserve the weakest among us? What's the motivation behind that?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
a tough question.
It's not just about the weak. It's compassion. Right.
Okay. Right. But why compassion? Why do we, if we follow the science, right? The prevailing science is the Darwinian model of the survival of the fittest.
Wait a second. Are we on science or religion now? We're Darwin.
No, I'm talking
science. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Right. Okay.
Because then we can go to the Bible and we can talk about compassion, but we're on Darwin right now, so let's go science.
Right. So if we go science, right? The best science tells us that the fittest survive, and the weak should be paired off.
So you got a new dog the other day. What if your dog gets sick? Are we going to have to just get rid of him?
Well,
or do we pay $1,000? Do you have But as I went through this with my dogs, where I had one dog that cost a lot of money to keep that darn dog alive, because he always got sick and he always had this little problem. We'd always, shell out more money. Do you have a line that you draw on a dog that says, okay, I'll spend $500, but I'm not going to spend $1,000, and just give him the lead sandwich, or what?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's where I would step in as a Christian and say the biblical worldview mandates that we have compassion. All right. And the question is, how do we mete out that compassion, right? So I, as a Christian, say, okay, I'm a healthy human being. I need to provide for my family, otherwise my family is going to suffer.
Sure.
I'm willing to go out there and take the risk, and say, okay, I'm not going to go to Thanksgiving in Texas. I'm not going to go to Christmas time in New York, because because I could be a latent carrier or whatever else. Let's be smart about this. I'm going to wear a mask.
But you didn't say that before you made it about money and whether you were going to work the next week.
Okay.
And maybe you wouldn't even to mask your COVID.
No.
If you had COVID, you didn't want to know. Because you didn't want anybody else to know.
Right, because the government is mandating that I not work. because of that. So even if I was diagnosed positive with COVID, yeah, I'm, the decision is still mine.
It is
to go and say, okay, I've been diagnosed positive with COVID, and maybe I ought to just, the CDC is saying, hey, if you've been diagnosed with COVID, stay home a week, stay home 2 weeks. That's what they're advising. That will help, not expose other people to it, and perhaps people that might be whatever. Then I might be able to say as an individual, that might be a good idea. But when you cram this down on people, that's when you start to see people squirm and rebel. When you take the decisions out of the hands of individuals, the more you do that, couple of things happen. One is you see more people just say, screw it. I'm just not gonna abide anymore by what they say. And number two, like we saw with the Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security, the government never relinquishes those freedoms again. You'll never be able to go through an airport without going through TSA. Never happen again. Okay. We will never be under a less surveillance state than we are now.
No, never. We talked about that too.
100%. So when you start handing this kind of power over to the authorities, that power is very rarely, and I would challenge anybody to state a case where that kind of power was handed over to the federal government that wasn't set. That when the crisis was over, they said, "Okay, crisis over. We have to stop doing this." The one example I could give was when we interned Japanese in the internment camps in World War II, and then we said, "Okay, maybe we should stop doing that." That may be the one example I can think of. But other than that, when government takes power, when they take your freedom for your safety, they never return that. Yeah. And so that's.
But doesn't our society keep getting better and better? When it's not about them taking power, it's about us abiding by a new normal,
Yeah,
I think about it. Because our society is completely different than it was in the 70s or the 30s or whatever, And our freedoms, I know, I agree with you, they're much less. I mean, you can't go out and jump on an airplane like you did back in the 70s. Right. But we pay that price not because we're completely scared, but because our society has moved forward. It's like they've got flights now that are going to the UK from London, from the United States. Everybody has to have a COVID check before they get on the flight. Mm-hmm. Is that taking away people's liberties by doing that? What? Because if you have COVID and you get on that flight, aren't you exposing other people to take away their rights? Let's change the word of the name COVID to AIDS. Okay. Let's say Matt may or may not have AIDS. Okay. Mm-hmm. But his wife and child are going to New York, but he doesn't want to have a test because he goes to work or goes to New York. If he has a test and finds out he has AIDS, he's not going to be able to work for the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Maybe not be work for the next couple of months. I don't know. Or maybe it's kind of a death sentence because you're one of the 1,000. Now you've got a comorbidity and you may not make it at all. Mm-hmm. And I did look it up, and we talked about that one time about the AIDS thing. There are laws in almost every state about if you infect somebody with the HIV virus, that you can be held accountable criminally and
that would be a regulation I would agree with. So if
so wait a second, but the big sticking point right now in our Senate is they want to free all this regulation around. They're worried about people suing somebody because if I gave you COVID, right? You come visit me, I cough on you, you get COVID, and you sue me. But what they want to do now is they want to get rid of that. They want to attach it onto this next bailout bill that all the businesses are absolved of all that responsibility, And,
Yeah.
But if that business was giving out AIDS, they couldn't be absolved.
No, well, no, I wouldn't put it on the businesses. I'd put it on the individual. So if
Okay.
I received a COVID test and I was positive, I would stay home. I would stay home for what the CDC recommended. CDC says, hey, look, y'all go out and get tested. Get tested. You test positive. What we recommend is that you stay home for 14 days.
And then get a negative test.
And then get a negative test. However, that's fine. That's our recommendation.
Yeah.
If you disregard our recommendations and it turns out you were positive and you infected somebody else who died, you could be held liable. That's a perfectly sane law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But what we're doing now is we're trying to control the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what history has shown us is when the authorities take power, that power is in the form of exchanging safety for freedom. Mm-hmm. Those freedoms are rarely returned. And again, I give you the perfect example from a Republican administration of the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security.
Absolutely.
So
but
I think
other countries didn't have the freedoms we had at that time.
Right.
Walking your loved one to the gate or picking them up at a gate when they're returning from a trip. No, nobody could do that. You couldn't do that if you were in Europe. You couldn't do that in Asia. I mean, you always waited in the lobby or some kind of waiting area. You were never allowed out into the airport. It wasn't public space, so to speak.
Yeah.
Without a ticket.
Well, and again, I think that if you see a situation where you're at a point where, okay, there's no other way to solve this problem other than to take a freedom
mm-hmm.
and exchange it for safety, then I think a public official has to come along and say, okay, folks, I got news for you. We've got to take a freedom away from you for this piece of public safety that we just cannot find any other way to solve this. We are taking your freedom from you. Make no mistake about it. We are violating your constitutional rights in these ways. This is how long it's going to last. We have a sunset on these issues, and it will end at this point specifically, and we will stop taking that freedom. But that's not what happens.
No.
I
get that.
So yeah. So some honesty from our officials, that sort of thing. That's what would, I cannot tell you.
So if we really wanted to nip COVID in the bud, one way to do it, and I think you would agree with this from all the experts, is if we all just stayed home for a month. Everybody stays home for a month. Don't go to work.
But,
have your groceries delivered. There's going to be a couple of people that's going to have to be out there. But realistically, we could nip it in the bud if we all just stayed home for a month. What do you think?
No. Well,
other countries have done it.
Yeah. Right. And you're going to destroy the world economy.
Well, hold on. We're going to talk about that in a second. So that was my question is, why can't America stay home for a month?